Roughly a year ago or so now, I took a look at every Espada RESURRECCIÓN in Bleach. But there's so much more to Aizen's Arrancar army than just its select few elite warriors. The rank and file are made up of more than capable soldiers in their own right, and many of them unleash their Resurrection in the war with the Gote 13. The Arrancar Resurrection are some of the best examples of Kubo's unwavering ability to create incredibly cool, concise, and readable designs time and time again, and virtually every single one of these transformations was treated like an event, lending the Resurrection a palpable weight in the story, the likes of which the Volsten dish, for example, simply never had. So, in today's video, we're going to shine the spotlight on the remainder of the Arrancar Resurrection, from the Espada's Fraction to other distinct powerful members of Aizen's army, and even one modified monstrosity. Let me know down in the comments, which Resurrection is your favourite in Bleach, which design is the coolest, and which would you have liked to have seen more from? Alright, let's take a look. So we're actually kicking things off with what may very well be my favourite Resurrection on this entire list. Rudbornn's Arbol, which has a wonderfully simple yet effective and wholly unique design, transforming the leader of the Exequius into a withered tree of death. Released in chapter 340 with the command Grow, Arbol ensnares Rudbornn's entire right-hand side in thick, bone-white roots, which snake along his arm, while also spiralling down the Arrancar's waist, tapering off to create a ring of roots that then embed themselves deep into the ground, lifting Rudborn into the air. From the roots attached to his arm, several jagged branches sprout forth in a wing-like pattern, and from the tips of these branches, skulls dangle like fruit. Or at least the top half of a skull anyway. Rudborn's right hand is also covered in a skeletal armour, and his Zanpakuto has been transformed entirely, becoming an angular branch itself in the shape of a lightning bolt. In my opinion, this is just such a cool and creepy design, and fits Rudborn perfectly. It is elegant, while also being haunting, and the next time we see Rudborn a few chapters later, his Resurrection has actually evolved further still, likely now taking on its complete shape. Now the entire top half of his torso is wrapped in a strange, vine-like material, while the jagged branches encircle his entire back, giving him the appearance of a kind of terrible sun. Again, it is just brilliant, and it still looks really cool. I like the eeriness of the fact that you can see enormous roots growing from underneath his hakama, implying his legs are completely gone, and the lower half of his body has in fact become that of a tree. The differences in design between these two chapters make me wonder if Kubo planned for Arbol to be able to grow and evolve, or if he simply wanted to change the design a bit by the time he returned to it. And I'll also never forgive the anime for, in my opinion at least anyway, completely botching the colour scheme of this design, frankly robbing it of much of its effectiveness. Rudborn's Arbol has only the one ability, but you guys know that's generally how I like it. Simple, but effective, and it's really cool as well. During his battle with Rukia, Rudborn unveils Calaveras, his ability to grow foot soldiers from the skull-like fruits hanging from his Resurrection's tree branches. In a great sequence, we see the soldiers being born from beneath the skulls themselves then acting as the soldiers' own heads, as everything is fashioned in a grisly way, including their clothes, before Rudborn launches an entire squad of them at Rukia from above. There are a number of reasons why I love this Resurrection, to be totally honest. It looks awesome, it's very creative, there's nothing else really like it, but also it works as a lore device too, cleverly showing, not telling, where the Exequius come from. And considering just how many of these soldiers there are active at any one time, such as we see when he confronts Dordoni for example, it seems Rudborn's ability really is endless as he claims. Unfortunately for Rudborn, his Resurrection is completely countered by Rukia's ice, leading to his defeat. Coming up next, we have Loly's Escolopendra, released with the command Poison. Revealed in chapter 343, Loly's Resurrección transforms her, replacing her arms with two enormous centipede-like appendages, complete with sharp protrusions adorning the many segments. Meanwhile, white armour covers her legs from top to bottom, while armoured tendrils wrap themselves around Loly's torso and encircle her head like a crown. Now, she too only has the one ability, but it is a lot less interesting than Rudbornn's power. Anything these arms strike is immediately dissolved with a potent poison, as we see when she hits a pillar behind Yami, causing it to erode in a sea of purple sludge. Unfortunately for Loly, she's immediately defeated by the Espada. Much later, Kaname Tōsen reveals his surprise resurrection in battle with his old friend Komamura, unleashing Ggio in chapter 385. Now, of course, Tōsen is not an Arrancar, but I figured we'd include him here anyway, and interestingly, likely due to Tōsen's position as a perfect Vizard and a hybrid of Shinigami and Hollow, he doesn't use a release command per se, and instead activates his Resurrection with a command akin to a Zanpakuto ability instead, Suzumushi Hyakushiki. Disappearing in a fountain of black ooze and shadowy energy, Tōsen's hollow mask is all that's visible in the darkness before it's cracked, destroyed, and swallowed up, the black mass taking on a new form entirely. Upon transforming, Tōsen takes on the appearance of a twisted, mutated cricket, becoming a large insect whose body is covered in dark fur. Now hunched over and bestial, two curved horns protrude from his back, with broken chains dangling from the ends, while a set of insectoid wings sprout from beneath them. Tōsen now has 4 spindly arms, and his long, spider-like fingers are clawed and animalistic. Perhaps most peculiar of all, however, is Tōsen's head in this form. While the lower half of his face retains its human appearance, save for fangs lining his mouth, the top half is bulbous and bug-like, covered in the same skeletal armour of his hollow mask and unique shoulder armour as well. Crucially, Tōsen now has 2 gigantic emerald eyes, which give him the ability to see at last. In this form, Tōsen's natural abilities are improved dramatically, allowing him to not only catch Kokujo Tengen Myo's gigantic sword in his bare hand, but to overpower and even crack the blade itself as well. He can also fire 2 green Sero from his eyes at the same time. Tōsen's ultimate ability is Los Nueve Aspectos, wherein he draws 9 circles in the air in front of him before unleashing a colossal sound wave with the power to bring Komamura's bankai down in a single hit, devastating the giant warrior. Up next we have the last of the non-Espada, non-Fracción characters to reveal their resurrection, Wonderweiss's Extinguir, which is likely the single weirdest release form on this list. Unveiled in chapter 393 as part of a shocking twist, Wonderweiss, already in his resurrection, suddenly appears behind Yamamoto and catches the head captain's flaming Shikai in his bare hand. As Ryujin Jaka's flames vanish completely, Aizen reveals the true nature of Wonderweiss's resurrection. Extinguir was purposefully designed to seal Ryujin Jaka's flames, making it so Yamamoto can't use his Zanpakuto in battle. Wonderweiss himself is a modified Arrancar who sacrificed everything, his speech, his reason, and his mind, in order to acquire the power necessary to contain Ryujin Jaka, and this resurrection is the result of that. Considering we don't see Wonderweiss releasing his Zanpakuto, we have no idea what his Resurrection's release command is, if it even has one at all. Though I've always speculated it's more of an automatic thing. As soon as Yamamoto released Ryujin Jaka, Wonderweiss transformed in order to counter it, presumably having already defeated Kensei off-screen, though we'll never know for sure. In this form, Wonderweiss takes on a totally alien appearance. His entire body has stretched and grown to a completely unnatural shape. His face remains mostly the same, save for a new elongated helmet that also seems to remove his eyes entirely, while his shoulders are now a pair of gigantic pods, which house a seemingly never-ending supply of arms, which Wonderweiss uses to grab and restrict Yamamoto in their battle. Meanwhile, there are numerous gaps in Wonderweiss's stretched-out torso held together by thin bars, and overall he simply looks like a freakish abomination. This is by far the most unnatural-looking Resurrection, which is clearly the point. Wonderweiss is a cobbled-together monstrosity, and whatever hollow power he used to have has been stripped away and replaced with this. In this form, Wonderweiss has impressive high-speed regeneration. Even though his body is almost completely shattered by Yamamoto's initial punch, he manages to restore himself fully in a matter of seconds. Not only that, but Yamamoto notes that Wonderweiss doesn't use any preliminary moves before attacking, immediately lashing out with an incredible speed. Finally, upon the destruction of Wonderweiss's body, the flames that he had sealed within himself initially are released in a violent explosion. Alright, but with that done, it's now time to move on to the Fraction Resurrections, which make up the bulk of Arrancar transformations we see throughout the series. Up first is Edrad's Volcanica, which is the first Resurrection we see in Bleach. Released with the command Erupt in Chapter 203, Volcanica set the tone for what an Arrancar's Resurrection could look like, and interestingly, Edrad's doesn't actually change his design all that much. Edrad now has two gigantic rocky arms which extend far beyond his shoulders into the air behind him, his hands now heavy enough to leave a crater in the ground beneath him upon transforming. Meanwhile, the mask fragment on Edrad's nose is gone, replaced by a huge winged collar that connects to his arms via a plating across his chest. While using Volcanica, Edrad's overwhelming punches are augmented with an explosive flame, and his arms now sport exhaust ports which belch fire when Edrad charges up an even more powerful strike. After Ylfordt is savagely beaten by Ururu in Chapter 207, he releases his Resurrection del Toro, with the command Impale. In this form, the upper half of Ylfordt's body completely transforms, swelling in size and covering his torso and shoulders in a bulky armour, featuring a pair of massive oversized pauldrons and armour plating running down his arms. His most striking feature, though, of course, is his helmet, which takes the shape of a bull's head almost completely, complete with huge devastating horns, which he uses to skewer Ururu and later even pierce Renji's bankai. Ylfordt doesn't seem to have any special abilities in his Resurrection, simply growing stronger and sturdier. The final member of Ggio's Fraction to release his Zanpakuto is Shawlong, who, with the command Snip, activates the full power of his Tijerita in Chapter 208. Once the dust settles, Shawlong's new form is revealed. His mask fragment, which once covered half of his face, has now extended dramatically, draping his shoulders and torso in an intricate armour, while a sinister-looking two-pronged tail trails down his back, running from the nape of his neck before curving upwards, taking the appearance of a spine or something. The biggest change, however, comes in the form of Shawlong's hands. His arms are covered in the familiar skeletal armour, but his hands have elongated dramatically, with each finger essentially becoming a blade itself. And in this form, Shawlong uses his hands like scissors or knives to rapidly slice up Hitsugaya's body. Now, you might have noticed something that stood out to you about these first three Resurrection. They all share a very similar design motif, a design style, which I think is completely lost the further into the arc you go. Here it is very obvious that their Resurrections are simply an overlay, You can still very much see their original Arrancar forms underneath them, and it's almost like they are just wearing armor or something, as opposed to many of the subsequent resurrections that transform the Arrancar's body into something entirely unrecognizable, whether that's into something more animalistic or otherwise. And speaking of which, moving on now to the Waco Mundo arc, and the only fraction to release their Zanpakuto here is Tesla, who activates his Resurrection Veruga in chapter 297. Lifting his sword to his face, Tesla, with the release command Gore Them, transforms into an enormous warthog-like beast who absolutely towers over Ichigo. And yeah, this is exactly what I was just talking about. Tesla has been totally and utterly transformed. He's unrecognizable now, whereas Grimmjow's Fraction very much kept their previous identities intact. Now, is there a lore reason for this, outside of Kubo deciding he wanted to go a little more all-in with Arrancar Resurrections? You could argue it was because they were supposed to be Gillians, as noted by Aizen after they were killed. However, a little bit later on, in their flashback alongside Grimmjow, we find out that actually they were at Hukas class hollows after all, so that doesn't seem to work out as the answer to me. But anyway, in this form, Tesla becomes a hulking animal, whose muscular self appears almost again like an armor plating on his body. His face is now hidden beneath a mask in the shape of a warthog's head, again very similar to Ylfordt's Del Toro, complete with a pair of curved tusks, and his blonde hair now spills down his back as a mane. His lower half is covered in a light fur, and his feet have become hooves, which he uses to crush Ichigo's ankle. After releasing his Zanpakuto, Tesla becomes physically strong enough to snap Ichigo's wrist using just a single finger. As we continue on with this list of Arrancar Resurrections, if you've been enjoying today's video, consider hitting subscribe down below, as it really does help out the channel and your support is greatly appreciated. And also consider checking out my other channel, Mr. Tomo Talks Games, where I've been slowly and steadily growing an audience over there, and if you are one of the 90 or something % of my viewers who hasn't yet subscribed over there, and let's face it, you probably are, consider hitting that button if you do like what you see. It's quick and easy to do, and it makes the world of difference. Moving swiftly on to the Fate Karakura Town arc, and we get a plethora of new resurrections here as Baragon's army of Fractions square off against the Gote 13. First up, in chapter 320, is Charlotte, who releases his Zanpakuto with the command Glitter. Charlotte's Resurrection Reina de Rosas is actually kind of interesting despite Yumichika's reaction to it. Firstly, it's given an awful lot of prominence in the manga for a Fraction release, with almost 2 full-page spreads dedicated to it, and a cliffhanger as well. But secondly, and most interestingly of all, Charlotte almost completely retains his human appearance, which normally would indicate a Vasto Lord, even though we know that isn't the case. And I'm sure that the answer is just that Kubo simply wanted him to look humans for the design to work, but there's no denying that Charlotte is way more human in his release than even half of the Espada. After transforming, Charlotte is essentially completely nude, save for a crop top and an elaborate piece of underwear, both of which fan out dramatically to the sides. Attached to these fans are a pair of flowing pink capes, while plain white discs encircle Charlotte's wrists and ankles. The tiara on his forehead has grown larger as well, and he completes his new look with a tattoo on his abdomen in the shape of a curved purple heart. In this form, Charlotte's physical attributes are enhanced to the point where he's able to grab Yumichika's Fuji-Kujaku with his bare hand and suffer no injury as a result. His ultimate ability is Rosa Blanca, which surrounds his enemy with a mass of jet black thorns, completely closing them off from the outside world before killing them beneath a huge white rose. Although Avirama technically releases his Zanpakuto earlier than Charlotte, doing so earlier in chapter 320, we don't actually see his Resurrection Aguila until chapter 322. Releasing his true power with the phrase Scalp, Avirama transforms completely, similar to Tesla, wherein he becomes a gigantic red-feathered eagle. In this form, Avirama's face is hidden beneath a helmet in the shape of an eagle's head, while the rest of his body, save for his chest, is covered in red plumage. Although humanoid, Avirama has scaly, clawed hands and feet, resembling the talons of a bird, and wears a long white loincloth around his waist. Avirama's enormous wings are made up of steel feathers, which he can launch rapidly at his opponent with his ability Devora Pluma, the feathers having enough weight to punch through a building. Interestingly, Avirama's Aguila can be enhanced in the midst of battle. By carving a wound into the markings on his torso, Avirama sprouts a second pair of wings, while his mask gains a more detailed appearance. This allows Avirama to fly even faster, and he can use his heavy wings to both attack and defend with. In the following chapter 324, Findorr unleashes his RESURRECCIÓN Pinza Aguda with the command Carve Upon the Water in his battle with Hisagi. And suddenly, what have we here? A RESURRECCIÓN that harkens back to that original style that was prevalent among Ggio's Fraction. Findorr's original design is still very much visible after his transformation, and his RESURRECCIÓN seems really to only cover one side of his body. In this form, Findorr's right-hand side is totally draped in a shell-like armour, while his right arm has now become a gigantic crab claw attached to his shoulder via a wire. Meanwhile, Findorr wears a smaller claw atop his left hand. Honestly, I can't help but wonder if the reason for him having such a minimalist appearance compared with the rest of Baragon's Fraction is simply down to him breaking his mask so much prior to releasing, which is of course his gimmick he uses to increase his strength. In his RESURRECCIÓN, Findorr can use his huge crab claw to carve through buildings effortlessly, as well as defend against a Shinigami Zanpakuto. He can also fire a jet of high-pressured water from within the crab claw itself, and isn't limited to just the one, at one point blasting Hisagi with a near-constant stream of water, sending a net of devastating high-pressure water bursts towards the vice-captain. In chapter 326, Poww unleashes his Zanpakuto Calderon against Komamura with the command Breathe. Upon doing so, Pow's body undergoes a grotesque transformation. Initially, the Arrancar's head inflates like a balloon, becoming too heavy to hold up as he then buckles over, dropping to the floor. However, once transformed completely, Poww is now enormous, looming far above the buildings of Karakura Town. His body has become bulbous and gigantic. His hands are now bloated and disproportionately enormous in comparison to his now otherwise tiny head, and his underside, running from his bottom lip all the way to his abdomen, now resembles the underbelly of a whale. In this form, Poww moves extremely slowly, as even the slightest effort is bothersome to him. He's now able to open his mouth cavernously wide as his bottom jaw sags, giving him more room to launch a Sero. There's not much to say about Pow's RESURRECCIÓN, to be honest, as it's instantly killed in a single hit by Komamura's bankai, and I can't help but wonder if it's even worth him using it, considering how tired and sluggish he becomes. A few chapters later, in chapter 331, Nirgge unleashes his RESURRECCIÓN in battle against Omaida. With the release command Trample, Nirgge activates his Mammut, the Arrancar's uniform tearing to shreds as he becomes a woolly mammoth covered in light green hair. Once transformed, Nirgge becomes incredibly bulky, something that he notes makes him move a bit slower. His hollow mask fragment now takes the form of a sturdy helmet that rests atop his head, two long hooked tusks protruding from either side. Aside from his now massive form, Nirgge's most prominent feature is his huge trunk, which he whips at his enemies with enough force to demolish a rooftop. Despite his heft and overall slower speed, Nirgge's Mammut allows him to clear an entire building in one leap, while he also becomes hardy enough to take a direct hit from Omaida's Gegetsuburi to his head and survive, though a captain then being thrown at his head is later enough to kill him. Meanwhile, we find ourselves with another situation akin to that of Charlotte and Avirama from earlier. Ggio Vega, the final member of Baragon's Fraction, technically releases his Zanpakuto before Nirgge does, doing so earlier in that very same chapter. However, we don't actually see Ggio Vega's Resurrection until chapter 332. Releasing his Zanpakuto Tigre Estoc with the command Bite Off, Ggio Vega's transformation takes inspiration from a saber-toothed tiger, complementing Nirgge's woolly mammoth nicely. To be honest, I think it would have been a really cool theme if the resurrections of each member of Baragon's Fraction took after an extinct prehistoric animal. In this form, Ggio is wearing an outfit that resembles his original uniform, but it's now wrapped in thick black bands designed to evoke tiger stripes. Cuffs of yellow fur can be found at his elbows and knees, while he wields a pair of flat-tipped blades upon either arm. An enormous black and yellow braid flows behind him, and he wears the skull of a saber-toothed tiger atop his head. Ggio is able to launch the fangs of his saber-toothed tiger skull like missiles at his enemy, and uses them to pin Soifon to a wall, although they don't seem to grow back afterwards. Again, like Avirama before him, Ggio is able to access a totally different form of his Resurrection, though his is even more dramatic and distinct, even having its own name. Activating Tigre Estoc El Sable and calling this form his Resurrection's combat configuration, Ggio transforms, the blades on his arms tearing his hands to pieces as they expand into giant spikes, while the rest of his body inflates, growing enormously muscular and bulky. Whatever Ggio's power is in this form, however, we don't know, as Soifon kills him immediately with Nigeki Kesatsu. And finally, we have all three members of Harabel's Fraction, who release their Zanpakuto at the same time. In chapter 335, after all three of them are caught in Hinamori's Kido net and incinerated by an explosion, they return stronger than ever before by activating their resurrections. Apache is up first, and with the command Thrust, she releases her Zanpakuto Sierva, which transforms her into a deer-like creature. Apache's entire body is covered in a brown fur, and a pair of antlers protrude from her forehead where her hollow mask fragment once sat. Then Mila Rose appears, unleashing her Zanpakuto Leona with the phrase "Eat your fill." In this form, her Arrancar uniform is gone, replaced instead with a tribal, animalistic outfit that almost completely exposes her body, save for a few armoured garments. Her hair has now become an enormous mane that runs down her back, capped off by streaks of gold that flow from her hollow mask fragment. In this form, Mila Rose retains her broadsword, but it has now become gigantic, and she has a pair of fangs in her mouth to complete the lion look. Finally, Sun releases her Zanpakuto Anaconda with the phrase "strangle to death." And hers is probably the one that introduces the least amount of change to her overall design. Sun already appeared snake-like thanks to her long flowing gown and billowing sleeves that concealed her hands, and now this new form of hers has simply taken that up a notch. After releasing Anaconda, the lower half of Sun's body does turn into that of a giant white snake, and armoured scales run the entire length of the underside of her body. I do think it's a really cool and subtle design, the way the serpent body becomes an extension of her outfit. It's honestly really neat. And not only that, but her hollow mask has extended over the back of her head as if to resemble a cobra's hood. From what we've seen, Harabel's Fraction only have one shared ability between them, but it's a powerful one. By offering up their left arms, the three of them together activate their ability Chimera Parka, in which their sacrificed arms merge together to create the monstrous, nigh unstoppable abomination Aion, who had to be brought down by none other than Yamamoto himself. Interestingly, however, at least of the Thousand Year Blood War arc, Chimera Parka is not an ability exclusive to their Resurreccions, as the three of them tear their left arms off to summon Aion in order to battle Nirgge OP while still in their base forms. So whether that's an upgrade over how they were in the Fate Karakura Town arc, or they were always able to summon Aion in their base or not, we don't know, but still is a detail I thought I'd bring up. Now technically there is one last fraction to talk about. Lilynette, the sole fraction of the Primera Espada Stark. But of course, as you all know, this isn't a normal situation, however. Lilynette and Stark are one and the same, and she acts as Stark's sealed power. By placing his hand on Lilynette's head in chapter 361 and uttering the phrase "kickabout," Stark releases his Zanpakuto Los Lobos, using Lilynette as the conduit. So it's not technically Lilynette's Resurrection, though it kind of is, as they are the same person, but that ultimately makes it an Espada's power, which we've discussed in a previous video. Before we go, there is one final form to discuss. Grandfisher's power form, as revealed in chapter 187, right at the start of the Arrancar arc. Now, the reason I didn't include this earlier in the video is simply because this isn't a Resurrection, at least not in the style we know. Grandfisher doesn't use his Zanpakuto to unlock this power. Instead, his mask just shatters atop his head somehow, allowing him to transform further and become more monstrous and grotesque in the process. In this behemoth of a form, Grandfisher gains a second pair of legs, which actually aren't that easy to see, and a set of giant curved horns that protrude from the fur covering his shoulders. The shape and design of his head also changes dramatically once the top half of his mask shatters. But while he is technically an Arrancar, this is clearly around the point of the arc where Kubo hadn't quite finalised how the Arrancar were going to work just yet, and so this absolutely isn't a Resurrection in the way we consider them. Alright, but that's it for today's video. That's it for every single Arrancar Resurrection in the manga who's not an Espada. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Which one is your favourite? Which design do you like the best? And how do you feel about Kubo seemingly changing the way he was designing Arrancar Resurrection, as Grimmjow's Fraction definitely have a very distinctly different style to virtually every other Resurrection that came afterwards. Honestly, while I love the Resurrection in general, I can't help but appreciate those earlier designs. There's something really cool and tactile about the fact that they do seem to just be overlays on top of their existing bodies. I kind of like that, to be honest, but of all of these Resurrection, like I said at the start, my favourite is Rudbornn's Arbol, pretty much without a doubt. And my least favourite, that's difficult to decide. There's not many misses among these, to be honest. If I had to pick one, it would probably be Tesla's Veruga, as to me it doesn't really seem to fit the character at all, but it's just a matter of preference at the end of the day. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Alright everyone, but that's it from me as always. Thank you so very much for watching. I hope you took something of value away from this video today. Do let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Consider hitting subscribe if you haven't done already. Check out Mr. Tomo Talks Games as well if you haven't done that. And if you have done it and haven't yet subscribed, your support would be greatly appreciated over there. And as always, a massive thank you goes out to my wonderful supporters over on Patreon, who I simply couldn't do this without. Thank you so very much. It does mean the absolute world to me. So once again, guys, thank you so very much for watching. Until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.